In the deep forests, far from civilization, there is an old abandoned house, which is rumored to be inhabited by something terrible. The locals avoid this place, but one day a group of students, Anna, Maxim, Dmitri and Sveta, decides to check out how scary these rumors are. They arrived at sunset, and dark clouds were gathering over the forest, and the wind was howling, as if predicting trouble. The students decided to spend the night in the house to check if these are real ghost stories. The night came down quickly. They set up tents in the cabin, and suddenly there was a crash, as if someone was sneaking into the house. Everyone froze and looked at each other, trying to avoid panic, but a feeling of fear gripped them. They propped themselves up with pillows and began to tell scary stories, trying to dispel fear. The more they talked, the more inexplicable the tension became. Suddenly Sveta noticed movement outside the window. A shadow flashed, and her heart began to beat faster. They went to the window, but there was no one there. Maxim tried to calm them down, saying that it was just a trick of the light, but no one could get rid of the feeling that someone was watching the glass. Later in the evening, the students woke up to strange noises from the basement, mixed with the noises that were growing. Dmitri, not waiting for the others, decided to go downstairs and, starting down the creaking stairs, soon disappeared from sight. The remaining students began to worry and, after a short argument, Anna and Sveta decided to follow him. When they descended, they found only darkness and a strange smell of rot. When they returned to the room, they noticed that Dmitri was not there. The search yielded no results, and the students began to panic when Maxim saw a slight sniff coming from behind the door. When they opened it, they saw only an empty room and began to act even more panicked. Then Maxim noticed something white in the window, came closer and saw eyes glinting in the dark. It was a shadow standing behind the glass. Terrified, they ran out, but the door wouldn't open. We ran until it finally opened, but when we ran outside, we didn't notice how the fog rose, enveloping the house and the shadows that began to brush them away, as if slowing them down. Sveta screamed for Dmitri, but when they looked back, they saw a shadow standing on the window, like a ghost watching them, and realized that they could not escape from their fear. At dawn, when the fog cleared, they found only emptiness. Not a trace or sign of their presence there, only the wind whispered, responding to false stories that this house hides not just an abandoned place, but darkness itself. And rumors about this house remained, but now no one had heard about the students, because adventurers will always find themselves trapped in their fear. In a small town by the lake, there lived a young woman named Olga, known for her love of nature and walking. One day, while cycling, she saw a trail that she had never noticed before. The path was framed by tall trees and looked alluring. Although the locals warned not to stray too far from the usual routes, Olga's curiosity prevailed, and she decided to explore this mysterious trail. With every meter she went deeper into the forest, and the sun began to disappear behind the clouds. The amazing sounds of nature were mesmerizing, but soon the silence of the forest became ominous. Olga noticed that she could not hear the usual sounds of nature, no birds, no rustling of leaves. Only the tense air reminded her that she wasn't alone. When she reached a small clearing where strange flowers were growing, Olga decided to take a break. However, upon closer inspection, she noticed that they had something unusual. The petals seemed to be covered with something resembling shiny sweat. At that moment, she felt someone's eyes on her and turned around, but she didn't see anyone. Fear filled her, but she tried to calm down and continued on her way. Suddenly, her bike creaked, and she realized she couldn't go any further. Olga tried to release the brakes, but they jammed. In a panic, she left her bike and ran along the trail, hoping to find a way out. The forest seemed to be alive. Branches snagged her, as if trying to stop her. She stumbled and fell when she heard a soft whisper behind her. It was almost unintelligible, as if someone was calling her name. Trying to catch her breath, Olga noticed that there was an old book lying on the ground next to her. She picked it up and, opening it, saw drawings of strange creatures with long limbs and empty eyes that stared cruelly at the paper. Suddenly, a shadow appeared, stretching behind her, and the voice whispered her name again. The woman turned around. A tall and skinny creature was standing in front of her. His skin was gray, and his eyes glowed like coals. Realizing that she was trapped, Olga abruptly ran back, piercing the forest in search of a way out. She could feel the evil eyes watching her from every side. The shadow behind her approached, whispering words that only she understood. Her heart was pounding with fear. But at some point she saw a light in the distance that seemed to be the way out. Olga rushed towards the light, and although the forest tried to stop her, she managed to get out onto a familiar path. She turned around and saw all the creatures disappear into the darkness of the forest. Relieved, she returned to the city without telling anyone about her terrible adventure. Since then, Olga avoided the forest, but from time to time, when she passed by the lake, it seemed to her that somewhere, in the shade of the trees, she heard her name again. In a small coastal town surrounded by gloomy cliffs and an endless ocean, there was an old, abandoned lighthouse. According to legend, during a severe storm, an old caretaker and his family disappeared from the lighthouse, and since then no one dared to be near this place after sunset. Locals claim that the lighthouse sometimes turns on in the fog, and the sound of strange singing can be heard from there. Three friends, Igor, Katya and Oleg, decided to spend a weekend in this city and, inspired by local legends, decided to explore the lighthouse. They set off at sunset, when the sky turned orange and purple, and the wind carried disturbing omens. The friends arrived at the lighthouse after dark, and the ghosts of old legends began to whisper in their heads. The walls of the lighthouse were covered with moss, and the door creaked crookedly, as if protesting their intrusion. Overcoming their fear, they went inside. The atmosphere inside was oppressive. The smell of rot and the salty sea mixed in the air, and the shadow of the lighthouse seemed alive. On the ground floor, they found several antique maps and diaries that talked about the strange events that took place on that tragic day. It became clear from the recordings that the caretaker's family had discovered something terrible in the depths of the sea, and since then the lighthouse had become a place full of darkness and fear. After staying too long, the friends decided to go up to the top floor. As they climbed the creaking stairs, they felt a cold wind blow from the window and heard indistinct voices that seemed to be calling them. Oleg, feeling fear, began to hesitate. "I think this is a bad idea," he said, but the others ignored him and continued climbing. On the observation deck, they saw how a heavy fog covered the lighthouse, but suddenly one of them wandered to the glass and saw that there was a figure standing on the rocks below. A woman in white, with long loose hair. She was silent, but her gaze was full of sorrow. Suddenly, disappearing from sight, she seemed to disappear into the fog. Katya, feeling an inexplicable impulse, rushed to the stairs, wanting to go down. But Igor and Oleg grabbed her. "You don't have to go there," they exclaimed. However, it was at this moment that a faint chant came from outside their perception, causing them to freeze. The song was mesmerizing and disturbing at the same time. Holding hands tightly, they decided it was time to leave the place. When suddenly the doors of the lighthouse slammed shut, they screamed in fear and began to call loudly for help, but their screams were swallowed up by silence. Finally, with great effort, they managed to open one of the doors, and they ran out onto the moonlit shore. There, to their horror, they saw that the figure of a woman had reappeared on the rocks, but now her face was distorted in agony. She held out her arms to them, as if beckoning them to come over. Gathering their strength, the friends began to run away from the lighthouse, and when they reached the border of the village, they looked back. The lighthouse was plunged into darkness again, and the cries resembling pleas for help died away in the air. Since then, they have never talked about what happened again, but sometimes, when the fog covers the coast, they hear singing coming from afar, as a reminder that not all creatures they encounter on the way want to be saved, lost. In order to find their way into the darkness,